morning, everyone. I think we are ready to jump into the Astana Finance Days 2024 without any warming up and preliminary speeches. But anyway, I welcome everyone to the very first session of the Astana Finance Days 2024. And before we start, just a couple of information announcements for you. First of all, on the back of your badges, you can find the QR code. And if you scan the QR code, you'll get to the Telegram channel of AFC, where you'll find the updates about the Astana Finance Days, photos, Wi-Fi passwords, and any changes that may happen during the conference, as well as the text updates on what is happening on each panel. Second announcement, this is important fire announcement. You will, just in case of fire, for safety reasons, you will find the emergency exit in mini halls between the C4, C3, C3.3 and C3.2 blocks, as well as the by Zebra coffee shop. And of course, we thank our golden sponsors of Astana Finance Days, Visa, Freedom, and then the Kaz Minerals for supporting our event. Without the support of our sponsors, Astana Finance Days 2024 wouldn't happen. So thank you very much. With that, distinguished guests, panelists, I welcome you again to our first session, which is titled Finance, Law and Development, Shaping the Future of Infrastructure Investment into the Region. And I think this is always a timely topic as the region and country is seeking the new solutions. How do we modernize our infrastructure? At the same time, how do we invest into a new development infrastructure? Just a few days ago, during the address to the nation, President has emphasized that as well. So how do we modernize our energy, our utilities infrastructure? He also mentioned that maybe that the national fund money should be used for more macroeconomic stability within the country. And this also, on top of it, because of the strategic location of Kazakhstan and because of the geopolitical situation, need to invest in our transport logistics and also need to invest into our green infrastructure to produce more renewable energy and meet our country's commitment for carbon neutrality. So there is a lot of investments into the infrastructure needed in the country. And in this case, I guess we are not unique, right? Many countries, developing countries especially, are seeking for these investments. So here we have gathered a distinguished panel, representatives of the international financial institutions, development institutions, as well as the quasi-government entities and government representatives to discuss this question. Exactly what are the country's plans for infrastructure development and how do we finance those plans? With that, let me introduce our speakers. Starting from my left, obviously, because first of all, Mr. Hussein Ozhan, Acting Managing Director of Central Asia at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who I believe will discuss the bank's role in financing sustainable infrastructure across the region. Then you'll see Mr. Rustam Karagoyshin, CEO of Bayterek Holding, who will delve on how Bayterek is working to attract international capital to finance infrastructure projects in Kazakhstan. Mr. Kvandyk Kashkenov, Vice Minister of the Construction and Minister of Construction and Industry of Kazakhstan, who will share insights on the government's plan and the view on the infrastructure development. And Mr. Muazzam Mekan, IFC Hub Leader for Public-Private Partnership, South Asia, World Bank Group, who worked before as an IFC in Kazakhstan and was involved in the Bakat project, the famous PPP project in Kazakhstan, and will be share his experience both working in Kazakhstan and now in other regions of the world, how this kind of financing issues are resolved globally. With that, please welcome our panelists. First, I would like to ask our Vice Minister. I will go into Russian so you can use your simultaneous translation equipment. Кумандук Жумабекович, если можно, да, вот начнем с вас. В Казахстане постепенно набирают обороты строительство и реконструкции инженерных и сетей индустриальной инфраструктуры, это КОСы, ТЭЦы и другие объекты инфраструктуры. Но тем не менее, как бы есть еще большой, думаю, пласт работы, который надо провести, еще много объектов инфраструктурных, те, которые надо модернизировать, но и те, которые надо заново, да, построить, то есть новую инфраструктуру. В этом плане поделитесь, пожалуйста, видением министерства, видением правительства о развитии инфраструктуры в нашей стране. И, если возможно, то примерно о планах финансирования, какие, то есть сколько инвестиций нам нужно примерно для этого. Спасибо.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники конференции. Да, в целом большая работа государством проводится в части модернизации действующей инфраструктуры. Но в целом, если вас осветить, что у нас сейчас происходит с инфраструктурой, то на сегодняшний день по республике средний износ тепловых сетей, средний износ всех сетей теплоснабжения, водоснабжения, водоотведения составляет порядка 50%. Если брать по направлениям, то сети теплоснабжения этот показатель составляет 53%, по сетям водоснабжения этот показатель составляет 40%, и по сетям водоснабжения, водоотведения 56% соответственно. Наибольший износ, конечно же, у нас приходится на Улутаускую, Карагандинскую, Павлодарской и Восточно-Казахстанским областям. Большой износ, соответственно, оборудования и сетей приводит к частым технологическим нарушениям, соответственно, перебоям поставки соответствующих энергоресурсов, что сказывается на качестве проживания граждан наших. В целом, для решения данной задачи, в соответствии с посланием главы государства, в настоящее время прорабатывается национальный проект, где предполагается ремонт сетей порядка 10 тысяч километров сетей на общую сумму 2,5 триллиона тенге. Помимо этого, в рамках данных национального проекта также прорабатывается по модернизации 45 кондиционных очистных сооружений, то есть КОС. Вы на сегодняшний день, наверное, тоже знаете, что у нас порядка износ сетей КОС доводится до 60%, а где-то в определенных городах даже данных кондиционных очистных сооружений на сегодняшний день не существует. Вот. В целом на модернизацию кондиционно-очистных сооружений с 45 проектов планируется привлечение 830 миллиардов тенге. В настоящее время по 8 проектам уже ведутся переговоры и проекты именно финансируемые международными финансовыми организациями. По остальным проектам у нас, конечно, определяются источники финансирования. В целом в течение 5 лет в рамках национального проекта предполагается для модернизации данных сетей привлечение 3,5 триллиона тенге. Тем самым данные инвестиции позволят снизить у нас износ сетей до 40% к 2030 году. В целом, в свою очередь, хотел бы отметить, что Министерство готово к сотрудничеству и диалогу в части именно финансирования и реализации данных проектов. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое. Mr. Osan, so the Vice Minister did a brief review on the modernization of infrastructure, but again, as I said, the modernization is not the only challenge or goal we have, but also investing into the transport infrastructure, what we call a middle corridor, is an important task for the government, for the country to increase its potential as a transit hub and also increase its export potential. And according to the EBRD's last year report on sustainable transport connection between Europe and Central Asia, while the middle corridor has a theoretical capacity, annual capacity of 160,000 TEUs, actual usage is much less, right? I mean, there is still a lot needs to be invested into both hard and soft infrastructure. So from EBRDs and your point of view, what are the key bottlenecks that need to address to fully utilize the capacity of, or to fully use and develop the capacity of the middle corridor? And what is the view of the EBRD, how we can solve these issues? Please.
Thank you very much, Renat. First of all, congratulations for the Astana Finance Days, very well organized and gathered everyone here. A lot of familiar faces here, so I'm really happy, glad, and honored to be here. Now, I would like to also come back after the middle corridor and say a few words of the overall infrastructure needs, as you indicated in the opening. But indeed, you're absolutely right. At its peak in 2023, the capacity utilization of the Trans-Caspian Transit Corridor or Trans-Caspian International Transit Route, or as you call it, the Middle Corridor, was only 35%. So that 160,000, TEUs, the 20-foot equivalent TEUs, were only 35% used last year at the peak. This points to the fact that the physical infrastructure might not be the most immediate need. Of course, there are needs, and our study, the Sustainable Transit Corridor study, has come up with, for the Trans-Caspian route, a total of 17.5 billion euros of investments in the hard infrastructures across the entire corridor is needed immediately. But before than that, I think it's about because of the multimodality of the system, because of the lots of different parties are involved, the bottleneck, the immediate bottleneck, might not be the physical infrastructure. So it is clear that the middle corridor or the Trans-Caspian transit corridor could offer a safer, a shorter, and a more alternative to the other corridors that are being in use. But at the moment, it is more expensive, although the price varies significantly, which is actually a more important factor, that you need to have predictability, and which puts a lot of uncertainty and predictability problems. And secondly, shipments take between 15 to 60 days. And this is also another problem in terms of predictability, because if you have some sort of perishable goods and you don't know how long it will take for it to reach to the final destination, it is a problem. So because of the multimodality nature of it, several border crossings, multimodality meaning it will be on a train, then it will be on a crossing the Caspian Sea on a ship, it will be then on a train and a truck potentially, or again sea through the Black Sea, etc. So multimodality and several border crossings and the fragmentation. There are dozens of different parties that are involved. It is a very complex logistics management operation that will take time to orchestrate right. So this is why resolving the soft infrastructure first. So there are the hard infrastructure projects, which are the one that I said, about 17.5 billion of potential projects across. But there is the soft infrastructure, digitalization, it's the normalization and identification of tariffs, schedules, it is all of the paper governance around it, customs controls, and everything else. This needs to be harmonized and optimized for the corridor itself to be effective and a good alternative source. Now, the paradox of the middle corridor actually is not the lack of capital. There is enough capital, there are enough investors out there, but it is the lack of bankable projects that are out there. Now, it is supported, this project, or overall middle corridor is supported not only by the governments across or the states, but a lot of supranationals, IFIs, EU, EIB, ourselves, World Bank Group, ADB, etc. However, the important to look at the big picture to consider how there's a window of opportunity, how this can be implemented fast. Now, there are also very good developments. Those developments are a platform for the implementation of the middle corridor has been established. A 3-country agreement between Kazakhstan, Georgia, and Azerbaijan have been put in place. And in fact, in Astana International Finance Center, there is a joint venture has been formed and incorporated already that is looking at harmonization of these. Now, you asked how EBRD is also helping. Now, there are important projects. Railways is the first one. KTJ has priority projects there. Dostik Mointy is one, Almaty Bypass is another one, Darvaza Maktaral project is another one where it connects Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, which connects to the middle corridor itself. There are also other modernization projects out there. There are road projects, and also needless to say, mention the port leg of it. There is the Aktau port projects, the Kurik port projects, and there are a few others. And throughout the other side, there's also in Azerbaijan and Georgia many projects as well. We are involved in most of them. Just this year, we have financed our collaboration with Kazakh Demirjoli. We have financed a 200 million Swiss francs project with them, which will help to alleviate some capital to actually can be spent on middle corridor projects as well. We are looking into projects at the port infrastructure. We are looking into projects for regional road reconstructions that will feed the middle corridor as well. And finally, we are also a part of this coordination platform trying to increase the efficiency of this through the technical cooperation with various entities and across the board with not only Kazakhstan but with other Central Asian countries and with the countries on the Caucasus as well to support the development. I think I will leave it for now here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You wanted to also add on the overall infrastructure.
If I have time, I will be.
It's okay. Yeah, I think it's yes. I think it's important to hear out that.
I cannot agree more with the Vice Minister here. Is that the needs for overall infrastructure investments are vast, and that's across many different subsectors. So talks about the energy, heating, district heating networks is important. Water, irrigation is an important one. Wastewater treatment and municipal infrastructure projects are extremely important. Transport infrastructure is very important. And there are, I think the current program looks into a very ambitious, almost 80 billion, big infrastructure investments. And there needs to be a very concerted and orchestrated approach on how to take these projects forward. Most important part is predictability, and the second important part is actually bankability of these projects to ensure that there are enough resources that these projects can be taken, can be commercialized, and private partners can also be involved in the financing of these projects. Kazakhstan is with BBB minus rating. It's an investment grade country. It has a very strong finances and a balance sheet, but all of these ambitious infrastructure projects the financing of that can be optimized. And for this, predictability, laws and regulations, and all of this is going to be needed. Maybe I can touch upon it later on as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alsan. And I think again, these two speakers have highlighted once again that we need vast investment into the infrastructure, both modernization, but also the new infrastructure. So we want, and Mr. Alsan has kind of breached already to what kind of solutions we have or we need to have in order to attract investments, because public capital cannot support all this investment by itself. So the framework that is used overall, globally, is the PPP framework, right? Public-private partnership. That's how you invest into these projects by leveraging public capital through private. And therefore, I would like to ask Mr. Mekam, who has again been and is involved in projects across different regions, but also was involved in this big PPP project, as I have mentioned in the introduction, Bakat projects, a little bit share his experience on that project, how it was implemented in Kazakhstan, but also maybe share the experience from the other regions he has worked and working now, like Middle East, like South Asia, how these kind of financing tasks, problems are tackled there. Mr. Mekam, please.
Thank you very much. It's really good to be invited back to Kazakhstan. I'm here after 7 years. Good to see so much interest in this topic. Good to see some of the good friends, which I haven't seen for a while. So good to be back here. As been said, I think if you just look at Kazakhstan, the investment needs are tremendous, right? Infrastructure, it's a very large country. It requires roads, it requires power, it requires airports, railways, ports. It requires a lot of investment. Where the money is going to come from? I think traditionally the governments have provided that money, but the fiscal space is always limited. So I think rightfully what the countries in the world, and of course Kazakhstan is trying to do, is mobilize the private capital. Everybody says, can we leverage the public capital to mobilize the private capital to do infrastructure, more public sector oriented projects? Now this is not something which is unique to today's time. Historically, infrastructure has been privatized or has been done through private capital. It's only in the last 100 years or so the governments actually have stepped in and started doing the infrastructure. If you look historically, if you look at the UK, look at the old railways. In the United States, railways. Who built those things? They were the private sector. They were never the government there. Even today, the railway in the United States is primarily private. The roads, bridges. Even the bridges in the UK used to be private. I don't know how many people this remember. When the British came to India, they built the railways. That was financed by the private sector. I think people just forget about these things, that how much private capital has gone into developing the infrastructure, modern infrastructure we face today. Now we are looking at the things from a different angle today, because we have a period where the public sector has been very much involved in the financing and the delivery of the services. Now we are looking at the private sector to do it. Why we want to do it? Of course, we require money to build more infrastructure, but more importantly, private sector is just efficient at delivering of the infrastructure. I think there have been studies which have been done around the world which says, I mean, we are in Kazakhstan, and I think all of you have seen this thing. A road starts, there is a time to do this project, and it takes twice as long to do the project, right? I mean, we have seen it all. And if you look at any government and say, how much this project was budgeted and how much did it cost the government at the end? And huge cost, overruns, time delays. We have all experienced that. How does the private sector do it? Let's look at Bakar. It's a $700 million project. For the first time, we are doing it in Kazakhstan, bringing in the private sector. It will take time. People are not used to thinking in outputs. What public-private partnerships do is allow you to think instead of inputs, outputs. I'm not concerned about how much bags of cement is required. I'm concerned about if the road is going to be constructed or not, right? If the road is not constructed, it doesn't matter how many bags of cement or how many trucks of concrete goes in it. What are the costs? It doesn't matter. So what we are essentially doing is changing the thinking from inputs to outputs. That takes time. And you need to come up with new legislation. You have resistance also because there's certain people are used to doing things in a certain way. The public works departments always procure, they build, they operate, and then they go and then repair things. This is how it works. Now you're coming up with a mechanism where you're asking the private sector not only to build, but also asking them to operate and take care of the maintenance of the asset for a long period of time. Obviously, it's a different way of doing things. It takes time. And that's exactly what happened in Bakar. I think, it was a $700 million project. We had IFC was the transaction advisors. EBRD, my colleagues from EBRD ended up financing, and we had a very good partnership, not only with them, with the Austrians and government and SECO, which were financing the advisory work, to create a model for the first time in Kazakhstan which can be replicated. The first project is always going to take a tremendous amount of time to do it. And that's what exactly happened. It took 5 years to prepare and deliver on this particular project, which is not unusual. We have seen that around in the world. But the idea is once you create the framework, it can just be replicated across other projects. Now, PPPs are all about risk. It's very easy to say, bring in the private sector money. But why would you think about it for a second? Why would private sector bring in money in a project which is long-term, and there's tremendous amount of risk, and they have to deal with the governments, they have to take the market risks on traffic. Why would they do it if the things are not under control? So you have to structure a transaction in which the risks are balanced between the public and the private sector. So the private sector then feels comfortable coming in, taking over the risks, and investing in the project and delivering it. Now let's look at Bakar alone, which you know. The construction was done 15 months ahead of the time schedule. Do you know of any government project where the project was done so early? I mean, it's very difficult to do it. I mean, now let's look at it. The private sector is not only responsible for building it quickly, they're going to operate it in a sustainable way, and they're also going to maintain it and repair it. Kazakhstan has severe winters. This project has delivered. It has not been closed. This has been maintained. And they will continue to do that, and after a certain number of years, the project will come back to the government, right? Hopefully the government is going to monetize it and not operate it itself. What's happening in India? In India, there is a huge toll road program. The governments have done the toll roads based on public-private partnerships. As they come off, their revenues are being monetized. That means they're securitized in the market. The bonds are being issued, and equity investors are being brought in. So the money can be raised and you can build more roads. Chinese did exactly the same thing. You build the project, once the traffic is established, you take it back into the market, and then you raise more money and you do more projects. So I think that, from my perspective, Bakar is a huge success. Regardless of whatever anybody says, it's a huge success. It's a $700 million financing, private financing infrastructure for the first time. Construction done quickly, early, well ahead of the time, and the quality of the surface is very good.
Thank you, Mr. Mekam. I think like a lot of the Almaty people who've been there, at least when they use the Baka, they agree with you. It's a success. I mean, that it made it comfortable move around the city, even though have not fully tackled the problem of the traffic in Almaty. But thank you. I think again we'll come back to the question of PPP, because there is always other side, and a few times we already touched on the bankability. So how do we make these projects bankable, but at the same time not put the burden on the users? I'll come back to that topic. But before that, I think that the PPP is not the only solution, right? Hussein, I believe, has already mentioned that the country's rating is investment grade, BBB-, and we also need to leverage that rating to attract capital. And I would like to address the next question to Mr. Karagoyshin, right, who heads the Bayterek holding as an agent of the government to finance a lot of the development project. And just last year, I believe you have approved the new strategy of the fund, and then one of the key pillars exactly bringing foreign capital, leveraging on the rating of the holding into the country so it can be invested in the country to development projects. Just recently, Development Bank of Kazakhstan, one of the largest institutions, financial institutions on the Bayterek, has issued bond for $700 million, if I believe, and it was like 90% subscribed by the foreign investors. Again, I believe it shows that the appetite for the country's risk is there, and the Bayterek with the Development Bank of Kazakhstan always been on the forefront of attracting this capital into the country. So would like to also, you have a private equity arm, QIC, so you can have different means of financing these kind of projects. So my question is, we have heard already some numbers around $80 billion equivalent of infrastructure projects in the future in the country. So a little bit maybe you can put more light on the plans of Bayterek on channeling or tapping on the global capital market and bringing this money into the country.
Thank you, Renat. First of all, let me congratulate our participants and this kind of meeting today. I see in this room good friends of mine here also. I'm wishing good day today and successful meetings in current situation. As told Mr. Vice Minister, our government nowadays settling big infrastructure program for 2024 and 2029, and they mentioned more than 200 projects with the volume of more than $80 billion. So, but important thing is not only bringing the money, as my colleagues told before. Nowadays, Kazakhstan is, it's not, I'm saying it's not for advertising, I think it is nowadays. Kazakhstan is a leader in Central Asia, and yes, we have good experience, bad experience, but anyway, nowadays we are not the young people, so that's why we understand that when we are bringing the money, we are not bringing only just money. So we need to bring smart money, technologically well sufficient, and timeline of the project is very important. I think everybody here is know about this. So that's why logistic issues, as Mr. Osman saying before, is very important thing. Last week I was in Germany, and German colleagues also told that more than 80% of turnover in the trading with Europe comes to Kazakhstan and Central Asia. So that's why middle corridor is very important, and without Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan and other border countries, it's impossible. But I saw there also, it's a question for Mr. Özkan, I saw there another corridors which is go without Kazakhstan, but I think it's impossible because there should be more investments, because mostly very ready infrastructure in these logistic issues, it's middle corridor, because Kazakhstan also involved in this project. Because you know, Kazakhstan has very big territory, so that's why in this line we have to be in that project, and we are ready to invest our aid to this project. As you told, that logistic issues is very important. So yes, Bayterek is very important and the main instrument of the government nowadays. And we have to bring most investments from not only, and we are not only bring, we have to accumulate and advertise as a Central Asia, not only Kazakhstan, and Central Asia projects, especially in infrastructure for the whole world. We have aim not only bringing the just money, as I told before, so we are advertising the possibility of Central Asia. That's why we are playing the key role in future growth of Central Asia. So that's why, yes, Bayterek totally, we are very conservative in our risk management. But in this angle, we will play and try to attract much more resources. As Rinat told, it's not will be in foreign currency, it will also tenge issuance of the bond on the outside of the Kazakhstan. As we already did some issuance through DBK, because DBK is our main institution. Nowadays, there's already keeps more than 1.7 billion euro bonds portfolio, and also we will advertise our AIFC platform, because nowadays in Central Asia I think it's the most developed one. So as you know, we already issued in the AIFC the green bonds this year for amount of more than $50 million. Yesterday we discussed with our Chinese colleagues about panda bonds, so that's why I think it's a little bit similar, but we will try to use this. That's why we are welcoming to this platform also, because yesterday we discussed where we can do some more connections in bringing these investments to the economy. That's why I think for Bayterek, for the nearest 2-3 years, will be the main mission to support our infrastructure renovation in Central Asia, especially in Kazakhstan. So in this job, for us, the important thing is cost of money. Cost of money, and as we understand, when we are investing in infrastructure, we have to understand that there should be payback periods. And it means that it should be very qualified construction. So that's why we will look for this also. And we will choose with which partners and which kind of investments we will go to this project. I will say that in coming 3 years, only for infrastructure of the cities, we are planning to spend more than 4 trillion tenge from the biteric aim. And so it is near the more than $10 billion. So and only biteric. But we are doing it like an anchor investor. So there should be also PPP solutions. There should be also private sector. Because you know that nowadays when we are mentioning infrastructure innovation, we are also mentioning other projects. Because we will try to use and accumulate all the materials and other kind of possibilities of Central Asia, especially of Kazakhstani producers. That's why I think when we are talking about infrastructure innovation, also we are talking about totally developing other sectors. So this construction area, this processing area, and other kind of raw materials for this big infrastructure growth in our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karagoshin. I think, again, this is great that the holding is looking at the different markets and solutions, not just Eurobonds, but other capital markets, and mentioned the Panda bonds. I think this whole requires a separate, and there will be a session kind of discussing these opportunities, given that how curve looks, and then that it is discounted at the US dollar rates, which is unusual. Historically, there was a premium, right? And again, this is for a different panel to discuss, but it, again, good to hear that holding is thinking widely on what kind of opportunities are there globally to tap on. I have promised to come back a little bit on the PPP issue on other side, so I will switch to Russian again. Куандык Жумабекович, мы проговаривали вот сейчас и про ГЧП, про как сделать проекты bankable, да, то, что называется, чтобы кэшфлоу по ним был не то чтобы просто понятный, а окупаемый. В этом плане, конечно, остро встает вопрос, о котором и глава государства также говорил в своем послании, когда он говорил, что надо модернизировать инфраструктуру, затрагивал тарифную часть, да, какова будет нагрузка на население, и что она должна как бы там постепенно, да, появляться, не создавая каких-то острых социальных вопросов. Поэтому хотелось бы услышать, наверное, ваше мнение, мнение министерства, не конкретно по тарифной, наверное, прям политике, но, я думаю, будет еще разработано в целом видение, да, вот, как тарифы должны формироваться, потому что они очень серьезно влияют вообще на будущее всех инфраструктурных проектов. Пожалуйста.
Да, спасибо, Ренат. Повторюсь, да, в рамках разработки национального проекта и да и в целом нашим министерством был проведен соответствующий анализ в части энергетической и коммунальной инфраструктуры. И мы именно также в национальном проекте сделали акцент на большой износ сетей в соответствующих городах. И если взять по секторам, с учетом этого анализа, то могу сказать, в 22 предприятиях именно теплоснабжения на сегодняшний день износ сетей составляет порядка 65 до 90%. Именно по 13 предприятиям водоснабжения данный износ сетей составляет от 70 до 100%. Ну и, соответственно, и 24 предприятиях водоотведения данный износ сетей составляет от 70 до 100%. Как я проговорил до этого, чтобы по возможности снижения износа сетей 50%, менее ниже 50%, то есть доведение этого показателя до 40%, требуется большое количество инвестиций, и мы при этом сделали эту аналитику, чтобы было в общем понятно по секторам. Если в целом у нас на теплоснабжение потребуется порядка 1,5 триллиона тенге для модернизации, то есть ремонта 1,9 километра тепловых сетей, именно 700 миллиардов тенге потребуется для модернизации 5,3 километра сетей водоснабжения, а также порядка 400 миллиардов тенге для модернизации сетей водоотведения. В целом на нацпроект потребуется порядка более 10 триллионов тенге Данные источники финансирования, конечно, мы рассматриваем разные источники финансирования, в том числе отечественные и международные финансовые институты, банки второго уровня, где-то будут идти за счет государственных средств, и нацфонда, есть различные проекты, то есть малые и большие, как я до этого говорил, также по кондиционно-очистным сооружениям. В целом, да, в рамках национального проекта мы рассматривали не только именно в части модернизации сетей, мы рассматривали в том числе загрузкой действующих предприятий объемом продукции, именно создание новых предприятий, создание новых рабочих мест. То есть эти ориентировочные расчеты также уже сделаны. Думаю, мы это в рамках национального проекта еще дальше проанализируем. Но в целом, чтобы все-таки сделать данный национальный проект привлекательным, будет внесение изменений в действующий тариф образования, чтобы возможности именно возврат инвестиций в разумные сроки, а также в рамках поручения главы государства, чтобы не было большого завышения роста тарифа на потребителя, будет просчитан каждый тариф для каждого субъекта естественных монополий. В целом, я еще раз повторюсь, большое количество, конечно же, инвестиций потребуется, потому что мы понимаем, модернизация на сегодняшний день требуется. Мы дополнительно ведем сейчас уже переговоры с действующими международными финансовыми институтами. Отдельно наша проработка идет и также с коллегами Байтерек. В целом, еще раз повторю, что министерство в данном направлении готово для переговоров, чтобы можно было побольше финансировать, инвестировать, и именно данные проекты, которые также заложены в национальный проект. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое. Mr. Mekam, if I can ask address you the next question. So on the PPP projects, infrastructure projects, one side, as we just talked about, is the tariffs, right? So what will be the burden on the users? But second kind of aspect of, let's say, fairness, that matters about the fairness is when you do certain projects and you try to leverage public capital, there is a, I guess, belief, or some people think that you are using public capital maybe for the benefit of a private capital, therefore is either subsidizing, or sometimes some countries use first loss clauses on public capital side, meaning on the government side. Do you think that's kind of fair from the market point of view, and does that align with the goal of developing the infrastructure? Basically, the concept of a blended finance, does it work equally on all parties, or equality is not the main concern here, if I may?
No, thank you. A very good question. I think the idea, I think, as the Vice Minister said, look, I mean, you trying to do projects which require a lot of investment, but you're also trying to keep the tariffs which are affordable, right? I mean, think about water or heating and some of the areas where you want to do it. Now, a project costs a certain amount of money to do it, and you have to still give a reasonable return to the private investor to do it. They have to raise the money, they have to undertake the project. They are not here for charity, they are here to earn money, right? So obviously, the project needs to have certain returns. Now, if you want to keep the tariffs low, what is the best solution to do it? You use public money, you use blended money, right? So you provide them some money upfront, or you buy what we call the buy down the capex. That means the government finances part of the capex, and then the rest of the capex comes from the private sector, right? And the government gets less return or no return on its capital, whatever the case may be, as it would do a public sector project. And what you do, therefore, you're doing is you're essentially subsidizing not the private sector, and I think this is something that needs to be understood. You are subsidizing the consumers, right? The private sector is still going to make whatever money it needs to make in order to undertake this project. But by doing this thing, you're essentially making sure the tariffs go up. Now, for example, I'll give you the example from Latin America when water is always a huge subject. Everybody is very sensitive. You know, we don't want the tariffs to go up. It is a gift from God. Why anybody is charging me for the water? But they realized when they started privatizing the water companies in Cochabamba and Bolivia and other places, and the tariff went up, there was a lot of uproar. And I think the lesson from there is that even if the tariffs need to go up, they need to go up gradually. rather than very quickly. And the second thing is they need to match with the improvement in the quality of the services. So if you are paying more as a customer for higher quality services, people can understand it. But if you are paying higher tariff for poor quality services, nobody understands it. Right? So I think this is where actually the public money comes in. In India, the World Bank Group and IFC was very much involved with came up with something called a HAM model, which is Hybrid Annuity Model. That's what it stands for. What essentially means is that the private sector is going to undertake the project. They're going to charge you certain money on the capacity which is developed, but there is tremendous amount of risk because they need to get paid back. Does the utility has the ability to pay them back? And if they don't, if the risk is high, what you do is you reduce the capital cost by providing certain blended finance, or what we call the VGF, which is the gap funding which is required to make the project work. This is one area. The other area is we use the blended finance to promote certain things. For example, renewable energy. If you are trying to promote renewable energy, and if the coal cost is coal-based energy cost is cheaper, how do you encourage renewable energy to come in? Somebody has to finance that, right? Somebody has to provide an incentive. The incentive, therefore, comes in the form of the blended. I think the concept needs to be fairly clarified that the private sector is not really, or the private sector who is doing the project is not really the beneficiary for this blended finance or the public participation. It is the customer. It is the consumer at the end of the day, because their tariffs are being kept down, or you are promoting certain kind of projects which will not happen. Now, these can come in the very form. In the European markets, when they were promoting renewable energy, they came up with something called feed-in tariffs. You probably have heard of what the tariffs were. They were higher tariffs just to encourage the private sector to come and to undertake certain projects. Now, if you don't want to have higher tariffs, the other way to do is provide lower cost financing. And where the lower cost financing is going to come from? Either the grants or public sector financing. So this is how we're looking at it. So I think it's a bit of education, but I want to actually clear the myth. The beneficiary is not the public investor or the private sector investor, it is the consumers.
Thank you, Mr. Makam. Yes, I agree. It's just I want to, again, so we have this discussion publicly, right? Because there is a perception that this blended finance and PPP framework, some people would ask, like, why we paying an interest rate for a public party? Why don't we just, a private party, why don't just we publicly fund it and then wholly own it and run it ourselves? The questions are there, so I think it's important to talk about them. And again, as you did, highlight the key difference, who is actually the beneficiary of this infrastructure investments and whom we actually subsidizing, who's the final user. And I guess the points you made are really good. As tariffs grow, you kind of want to get a better quality, otherwise it doesn't make sense and brings more questions. So the important part in all this discussion is the private sector or the investors that we want to bring into the country, right? And I mean the situation globally is not easy, right? And then the appetite for investors is important to understand this sentiment and appetite. Therefore, Mr. Karagoshin, if I can ask you, we see that the holding Bayterek is very active in engaging with international investors, namely development institutions, export credit agencies. Just as you mentioned, you recently been to Germany and met the financial institutions in Germany, in Italy, France. Just yesterday, these few days actually, we are hosting the Arab development funds in Kazakhstan. I've met few of them. It's great that we're finding these new MDBs, IFIs, new, I mean, in terms of coming to the market. So talking to them, what do you think is the appetite for the country, for the region, from the investors' perspective? How they view the region? Do they also think this is an investable region? So if you can a little bit to tell us about the international investors' appetite for the region, for the infrastructure projects in the region and in the country, please.
Thank you, Renat. Totally infrastructure investment is very hard and long-term investments. So why we are talking especially with, first of all, institutions like KfW or AFC, or European Bank, because in infrastructure investment solutions, this kind of institutions most experienced, this kind of development banks. If we are talking about the risk appetite, I think, for example, I can give our connection with Euler Hermes as an insurance agency. Nowadays, yes, before there was some hard risk for them in Central Asia, but in the last 2 years, and especially now, they are ready to come this area and invest for infrastructure especially. Because everybody understands that about the current situation in the world, and Central Asia plays key role also for Europe and also for China and other participants, that we have to do this infrastructure better and connect these trading possibilities. That's why we are talking first of all with institutions to bring smart investments to long-term projects, especially for infrastructure. As my colleague told, yes, the end user and customer of these services, it's our people, so it's tariffs. So you couldn't raise in one time rapidly tariffs because people wouldn't understand. And also they are waiting the quality for this kind of tariffs, what kind of service they are getting at the final. That's why there can be different kind of also financial solutions like balloon financing and other kind of investments. But this kind of investment can be done together only development institutions in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karagoshin. And I guess another macro concern, and Mr. Ozhan, if I can ask you, is the regulation framework right in the country. So we are a developing nation, and we always try to improve the rule of law, the regulation framework to accommodate PPP projects, investors, create this infrastructure, corporate governance, and etc. So how do you view this development in the country? We have discussed in other room before, right, that the last amendments to the PPP legislation. Do you think they are good, or they? I mean, always improvement is good, but how good are they? Do you think that the AFCs with business environments creates value in terms of attracting investors here and structuring their products? So please, if you can comment on this general framework and environment.
Thank you, Renat. How I want to answer this question is I want to separate it into two parts. Part number one, how do we ensure as EBRD that the regulatory framework is applied in an optimum manner, how the governance is set out properly in our projects, when we finance our projects. And secondly, I'd like to talk about what can be done at the country level to improve these, to ensure that the optimum structure is achieved and the maximum capital inflows or maximum attraction of any sort of capital. Smart money, as Rustam said, is a very important one. And then finally, I'll say a few words about AIFC and how it is actually supporting Kazakhstan at the moment. Now, all EBRD operations are assessed through a prism of our policy requirements. So what are these policy requirements? One of them, one of the most important ones, particularly across the sustainability side, is the environmental and social performance requirements that we have. Majority of the IFIs have it. Even now, the commercial banks also do have this. This is one of the key sides. So for each and every project, no matter how big, no matter how small the project is, we assess, we go through a big due diligence for it, come up with relevant action items to correct, to ensure that these requirements are met. This ensures both environmental and social sustainability. So this is one of these governance matters that we look at. Secondly, we're also looking at standards that are under our procurement rules and procurement and policy requirements, which also, and all of these requirements in Kazakhstan and in all of the countries that we operate in are vetted by all of our shareholders. And Kazakhstan is one of our shareholders and a big investment recipient country. So these key important safeguards are taken very seriously across the board. And this creates, first of all, a demonstration effect, a demonstration impact that this is being done, and the others who are undertaking these projects are looking at these at the micro project levels. And in recent years, we have stepped up our efforts on this policy engagement and focused with the state-owned enterprises as well. This is the next step where we look at it, particularly for all those projects that are undertaken by the big state-owned enterprises. Just to give examples, the Sovereign Wealth Fund Samruk Kazana, of course, Bayterek is a part of it, and their subsidiaries and companies. And seeing the improvements and replication of similar practices is an excellent step in the right direction to ensure that these regulatory frameworks are there. Now, I want to take this for a bit higher level at the Kazakhstan level. What we are doing, the policy engagements we have. Smart is a very good word. We're using it across the world. I think Rustam used it twice on the smart money. We also call this smart, but this smart is slightly different. It is the state-owned enterprises management assistance for reform and transformation. It's a program that we use and across the countries, and I'm hoping that we will also implement this in Kazakhstan as well. So this has 3 levels. So looking at all of this has 3 levels. One, that's at the national level. So we're talking about the national regulations. Looking at the world, trying to understand the best ways, state-of-the-art ways in terms of the general laws and regulations. So this is important one in terms of how the rule of law is looked at, and it needs to be predictable, it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be accountable. These are the important at the top level. So this is with the mainly sits with the government, and this mainly sits at the overall engagement level that applies to all of the sectors. So having, again, sustainable, predictable accountability based on having laws and regulations on this is important. Secondly, the second level, we look at the sectoral one. Every sector has different requirements. So there are regulators across the sectors. What are the best ways to provide financing, or what are the best ways to govern the projects or implementation operation bodies across these sectors? So there are works on this one. There are a couple important ones here. We look at what? Tariff methodology. We all talked about it. It needs to be, the tariff needs to be increased, yes, because it's been stable in Kazakhstan for a very long time, but how? What is it going to be based on? Which rules and regulation it needs to be on? So the tariff methodology is important. Sectoral regulations and laws are important. The secondary legislation is important. Unbundling of some of the services to basically get rid of the monopolies, to increase competition is in the key side from a sectoral point of view. And also institutional reform here is going to be also important. Giving the relevant independence to the regulatory bodies is going to be important across the regulations. And finally, the third part of the SMART is to work with the state-owned enterprises or the institutions themselves. We have, again, no need to recreate or recreate the wheel. So it's been done before. There are best practices out there. There are, governance plans. So create tailor-made corporate governance action plans with each and every institution to ensure how the finances are managed, how the operations are managed, how can it be optimal, who is going to be accountable for that, what is the best way, the optimum way to manage all of these is important. And the corporate structure and restructuring of this also of these companies to ensure that this is achieved is also important. So overall, I'm going to say it one more time. The investment needs are going to be huge. Every methodology of financing is going to be needed, required, from the government financing to private sector financing to attracting funds, infrastructure funds. Capital market development is also quite important. So all of these has to be predictable. They have to ensure that bankability is there and the sustainability is there. My final words is going to be on AIFC. We have been collaborating from the very beginning for the establishment of the AIFC. Astana International Finance Center clearly is the most advanced in the region itself. It's still a young institution overall, but it provides the best state-of-the-art international standards. That's the goal. That's why you have the common law here, you have the arbitration body here, the authority here, you have the courts here, you have the regulation authority here. It has its own international regulation, which sets the rules internationally for all potential investors. It has its own exchange. All of this combines, creates a safe environment for further international investors to come in and not only invest in Kazakhstan or be present in Kazakhstan, but across the region as well. So we hope to continue our collaboration and continue to support these, and this will also have huge demonstration impact for the domestic lawmakers as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ozhan, especially for your last remarks. I think we're just sharp on time, but if there are any final thoughts, takeaways, any of the speakers would like to make, we have a little bit of time. It's just voluntary. If I can start probably, and then you decide if you want to follow. So for me, I think we again touched on the needs for investments. We touched on different solutions that can be to finance those infrastructure needs, PPP, blended finance, leveraging the credit rating of the country and using the development institutions. We touched upon on the general environment that has to be there. So my three main takeaways, the first one is, again, this is quite obvious, said many times, is infrastructure investment needs are huge. The number was a few times mentioned, around 80 billion US dollars, and that's just Kazakhstan only, not mentioning the whole region. My second takeaway is that the leveraging public or government finance, we have to remember that we are not subsidizing or paying interest rate for private parties. We are actually subsidizing our economy and users. Here I would, this reminds me of one story. Again, this may be just a city legend. So I've met one of the, when I was in Middle East, so one of the counterparties, and we were talking exactly about that, how in few decades, Middle Eastern states have turned into capitals of capital or vibrant cities like Dubai and etc. So a lot of infrastructure was built, and they praised the leaders for the vision, etc. So one of my friends from Middle East told me this story. So when this all started, and international investors started coming in, the local elders, influential families came to Sheikh and said, like, look, why the foreign investors getting that land? Why is that guy building the hotel? Why it's not us? Why it's not me? Why someone is building a station? Why they're making money? Why it's not us? So he didn't say anything. It's, you know, this Majlis tradition, right? So where the sheikh sits and everyone can come and complain. So it happens few times, and then the final time they again come and like, look, they're earning money, they're building this, why it's not us? Why we don't own certain buildings? And he said like, okay, when they will wrap up and take out their buildings and take it to the plane, then come in, I will definitely stop them and live in the country. So basically saying that the infrastructure, all the buildings is actually for the benefit of the people, right? And if they have capital, they, meaning the investors have capital and building it in the country, this is for the benefit of the country. It will stay there in the country. You cannot wrap up everything, the roads, the infrastructure, and take it with themselves, right? So it's simplified, but I think that again, the meaning is there. So that's probably somehow, I feel like it's relevant. And third point, it's a word, it's a predictability. Of course, when building infrastructure and having this huge long-term projects for 10 years, for more than 10 years, it is important to have a predictability of legislation, of business plan. There would be some black swans inevitably, but at least the legislation has to be, I think, predictable, that all turns into a risk, and risk means higher risk means higher cost of capital, and we actually want to lower the cost of capital. So that's my main 3 takeaways. If any, yes, please.
I just want to add to the words of Hussein about last words. IFC maybe it's nowadays youngest one, but I think it is experienced one with the post-Soviet experience and with the soul of Central Asia. That's why I think it's the main area where we have to join and work together. Thank you.
I was told that we can actually take few questions from the audience. So if there are any questions from the audience, so any? Well, that's good. Then, yes, please.
Regulatory framework is very important, as has been said by various. Regulatory framework is always very important, as has been stated by some of the speakers. My question relates to any speaker. How does the regulatory framework work with the central banks, which have a very important role as far as the financial institutions are concerned, because one shoe size does not fit all? How's the central banks working with the multilaterals to create an enabling environment, which is not there right now across the world, across the global south or the emerging market economies? So that is a challenge that we all have to overcome. The central banks are very critical in this role, and also the asset managers, as someone touched upon it. So how do you see that interaction?
Any of the IFIs would like to take that question?
I can come in. Okay. You're absolutely right. Central banks are critical in terms of ensuring their main goal is basically market stability when you look at it. Particularly the leaders of the monetary policy. So for any investors, not only for IFIs, but for any investors, stability of policies, macroeconomic and microeconomic policies in a country, and having a monetary policy that is, again, predictable, and also ensuring that there is a stable market in the country is key. From a more detailed secondary portion of the question is that central banks are also important, especially in our geography, for the regulation of the financial institution sectors as well. Regulation of the market itself, availability of the liquidities in the markets as well. So from this point of view, they also play a role to regulate the availability of domestic capital. So from this point of view, regulation of financial institutions is going to be important to ensure that a stable financial system is there, and it is also sustainable for over time too. And more in a tertiary level, where we are dealing with central banks, is the local currency. Because local currency funding, financing, provision of local currency is key, especially for international investors who are coming here from an IFI, international financial institutions point of view. It is very important that we encourage the use of local currency and the local development of the local capital markets. So rules and regulations that are helping and assisting the provision of local currency in the markets allows us in our micro worlds as the IFIs to be able to provide this to the projects in the domestic market. Just from this point of view, what I can say, this can be done through the swaps, this can be done through, having the regulations so that the IFIs can come in and issue bonds and then raise local currency, etc. So there are many ways. But here, I'm very proud to say that Kazakhstan is the country that we have the most provision of local currency loans across all of EBRD's countries of operations. Between 75 to 90% of our financing is done in Kazakhstan. And this is, through our collaboration with the National Bank of Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Thank you, Osan. Well, then we wrap up this session. Again, thanks for the speakers. And again, just a reminder, Astana Finance Days just have started. We have a pretty packed 2 days. You'll find a lot of the sessions, a lot on different topics. So hope you'll enjoy it. You can always share your feedback with us. Thank you, speakers, for coming again, once again, for the first session. And let's all enjoy and share insights during these couple of days.